Greetings. Howdy. How y'all doing? So, I talked about Fear Street the last time I put a video on this channel. Now, I'm wearing my Scream jersey because, right? Now, I've watched the whole trilogy, so I don't have to worry about spoilers. I'm going to say this. If you haven't watched the Fear Street trilogy and you're on the fence about it, if you like horror movies, it's up your alley. 1994 is like Scream. 1978 is a Friday the 13th homage. 1666, Blair Witch feel in parts. Salem Witch Trials, definitely the overtones are there. And then you get into 1994 Part 2, which is part of the 1666. It's a split movie. I'm not telling anything that's going to spoil anything. But it's a movie that's basically two movies for the price of one. And so we go back, and then we go back to the present day of 1994, present day for this movie, which is basically like, it almost felt like it was a supernatural take, like this TV show Supernatural, the way that the second half of 1994 takes place. But you guys can let me know in the comment section. So, if you haven't watched it, I recommend it. All right. Now, for people who have watched it or they're not worried about spoilers, let's go ahead and get into this. This movie surprised me. And then it surprised me in the second part. And then it surprised me in the third. Now, in the first part, of course, you've got Dina and Josh, who are brother and sister. Do we ever see their dad in the three movies? Like, we see their dad, but it's not really their... Anyway, well, I'll get into it. But we never see their dad in either of the 1994 parts, which I thought was odd, because they talk about their dad a lot. It's one of those things that I thought, now, intentionally, the director's leaving this open in case they decide to do a fourth movie. That's how I'm taking it, is that at some point, if they go, well, we're going to do a fourth movie, it'll be Dina and Josh's dad that somehow is the main character, and we'll find out what happened to their mother. That's where I think part 4 would go, because the director has basically said she feels like they can do like a horror version of the Marvel universe. I hate it when people compare it to Marvel. Like, it's not the first interconnected movie series we've had, but okay, sure. The other thing too is I've seen a lot of comments along the lines of, well, who is this movie? Who are these movies for? Who are they to appeal to? They are to appeal to a horror crowd, myself included, as well as people who grew up on the R.L. Stine novels, the Fear Street novels, who may have been teenagers at the time. They're not now, so make the movie with teenage characters, but go ahead and put in all the swearing and gore to make them R-rated, right? So you're kind of appealing to your audience, and I understand why people might get confused, but I remember when those horror novels were coming up, I always thought of it this way, that like when I was in middle school and all that, it was all the romance novels, the teenage romance novels were all the rage. And I always thought that like the R.L. Stine books were an answer to that. Like, no, we will not read teenage romance novels. We're going in this direction. So, right? And of course, these are loosely based on Fear Street novels. So these characters come from various novels. I did read up on it while I was watching these, that like in between each movie, that I'd be like, oh, okay, this character's from that, this character's from that. And I thought it was interesting how they did tell this tale with all these characters. They did their own take on some of them, which is fine. And I thought it was very well done. So we'll start with 94. And I thought the Scream callback was obvious early. So you've got a girl closing up the store. And again, much like Drew Barrymore in the original Scream, you're like, oh, okay, so this will probably be like your final girl type. She'll get out. And she doesn't. So the guy that offs her is Ryan Torres, and the movie really makes sure that you don't forget the names, because they show them to you over and over and over again, which is good. It's smart. So that starts you down the rabbit hole. Now, what I like is that then they have, a car crash take place, which shows that Shadysiders have no problem murdering people, which might be their problem. But since they all die at age 6, I'm starting to wonder if Shadyside has like some, like, does everybody have 8 kids? Because apparently there's these murder sprees every 3 years or however long, and it just feels like they should all be dead already. But yeah, so there's a crash, and Sam gets out, and she sees the witch, right? Sarah Fear. Sarah Fear's the witch. Now, what I like about this is that she sees the witch, and if you've seen the witch, then you're going to die, is the whole idea, right? So this is kind of like a Ring kind of throwback. 1994, the Ring, of course, was in the 90s, so there's kind of, it's just, again, it's a hint of the Ring. It really felt like Scream through large parts of it. So, and I love the movie Scream, so I'm totally fine with that, as this jersey would reveal. I thought that as it went along, I thought it was really well plotted out. I thought that you really felt for Kate. Kate was the one that I felt for. So I've got the actresses that I wanted to touch on and discuss in this video on the board. Julia Raywald as Kate, I thought was very good, and she is back in 1666 as well, playing Lizzie, right? I thought she was a very good actress. I thought she did well, and she made you feel for her character when she meets her untimely demise, which is kind of surprising, only because they really make you care about these 4 characters, and then they decide, or well, 5 characters, and then they decide, okay, we're gonna have everybody fool around, which I thought was funny. I thought, you know what? Everybody in this movie, they're all fooling around with each other. And of course, in horror movies, if you fool around, you die. All of them did. And I thought, okay, so this is the director playing on a trope from these movies, which is that innocence helps you live. None of these characters are innocent from that perspective right now. So all of them are free to die then, right? I thought it was an interesting, and I don't know if I'm the only one that picked up on that. Let me know in the comment section below if you picked up on that. It's not about trying to write the next Citizen Kane. It's not about trying to write, some big, huge, epic story. It is about trying to write a really good horror story, and I thought they did very well. So the Sarah Fear thing, of course, is played off throughout, and they don't tell you very much. And then you end up in a situation where C. Berman, who was one that saw the witch and survived, ends up calling. She ends up calling on Dina and Josh after Dina and Josh had actually tried to call her as being the only survivor in 1978. So at the end of this movie, when Sam is the next one to get possessed, Dina overpowers Sam. They don't really show how she does either. Dina's very good at recovering from knife wounds. I'm just going to throw that out there. She can roll with it. But anyways, yeah. So we have them going over to C. Berman's house, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And there are times where they don't give you a name, and you find out why. So at the start of 1994, Dina's upset about Sam. She broke up with Sam. Oh, Sam. And I kept thinking, okay, so Sam can be a guy's name or a girl's name. I'm going to say it's going to be a girl's name. And since in 1994, a same-sex couple may not have been as acceptable as it is now, that was my guess, was Sam's going to be a girl. And it was. And this was a big part of it, was that Sam wanted to be normal and get out of Shadyside and go to Sunnyvale, where nothing bad ever happens. Nothing bad ever happens in Sunnyvale, and in Shadyside, average life expectancy is about 14 and a half. Just endless murder sprees, and they never, there were a few things they never explained in this. They never explained why Shadysiders didn't just leave. Like, you'd have to think that after, I don't know, the 15th massacre, you'd be like, you know what, let's move somewhere else. And yet you'd hear them saying, we can't leave. If Shadysider tries to leave, they'll get run over by a bus while they're trying to leave. So again, all of this to me says they want to build up this lore, and they're going to try to do more movies to try to get into the whole Shadyside Sunnyvale thing. So we get into 1978, and I was honestly surprised that 1978 was almost entirely a narration of C. Berman telling Josh and Dina about what happened in 1978 and Camp Nightwing and what happened there. And yeah, that was an interesting tale. I've seen complaints that when the murders happen, that they're not very creative. Saw an article on this. Not very creative kills in this. They're just all axes to the head. Yeah, an axe to the head's pretty good for finishing it off. I have to say that I get it. It's a 1978, so it's a Friday the 13th slash Halloween sort of throwback, right? And Scream kind of paid homage to those movies as well. But the idea of a killer finding really creative ways to kill people is interesting. But since these people are being possessed, it's not all that realistic. He has a very good weapon with an axe. Tommy, who I actually felt bad for in this movie, I did. And it makes you feel bad for these people that get possessed, because they're decent people who get possessed, and then they run around and do the mass murder thing and they end up dead. So Tommy picking up the axe and just axing people, I thought, you know what, this is more grim. Sure, I mean, some of the gore in these movies is over the top compared with your mainstream horror movies. It didn't put me off so much. There were a few in these that my wife definitely got a little bit squeamish during. Although there were a couple that we watched and went, that's not how that machine works. It won't do that. But just when you have experience with machinery and you go, that's not how that works. But again, coming back to Scream, when they use the defibrillator to zap people, and I'm like, defibrillators don't do that. You can't make it a weapon. Oh, nuts. So I'm used to being taken out of movies by this kind of thing. Coming back to Tommy, he just uses an axe, and he goes for the head. And it's brutal. And it's quick. It is about maximum carnage over a short period of time. So at the end of the second movie, we find out where the hand is. So you've got Sarah Fier's hand is in one place and her body's in another. And if you unite the two, you might break the curse, right? And there's this whole nursery rhyme out there, and there's graffiti all over the place of Sarah Fier. And so at the end of the movie, Dina puts the hand together with the body, and she gets transported into the body of Sarah Fier back in 1666. So each movie ends on a cliffhanger, right? And so we get into 1666, and immediately they start off with Sarah with blood on her face and a knife in her hand, but it's not what you think. She's helping a pig give birth, and they're cute little piglets in this movie, and I love the little piglets. I think they're really cute, and that's why everybody wants to get piglets. The problem is pigs get big, and they eat everything, and they get really, really big. And people don't understand that. Sometimes you get a little animal, and that's 250 pounds. Yeah, you should have read the warning label. So we go through this idea that the town becomes cursed, and it's Union at the beginning, right? So it's not Shadyside, it's not Sunnyvale. And what I thought was interesting was, and I've watched it twice. I've watched each movie twice because, of course, I watched them on my own, and then I watched them with my wife, because I know that she is adverse to gore, like major gore. And so I always, with a horror movie, I watch it first, and I go, yes, she can watch this, or no, she can't. Like Terrifier, that would be a no, she can't watch this. So I barely got through Terrifier, so, right. But yeah, this one, it really showed how the curse gets started, and it has so many red herrings out there. Like, for instance, the end of 1978, when you find out that this is not a story of Cindy, it is a story about Ziggy. Ziggy's the one telling the story. She is Christine Berman, who had the nickname Ziggy. So the whole movie you're watching this and thinking, okay, Cindy's going to be C. Berman. Nope. And I like that. I like that it sets this up and then it pulls the rug out from underneath. The fact that 1666 makes it pretty clear right out of the gate, Sarah Fier is not the bad guy. That's fantastic. That honestly threw me off, because again, I'm used to in horror movies, it's pretty straightforward storytelling. It's not like you start watching an Elm Street movie and Freddy, and then at the end you find out somebody completely different and Freddy Krueger had nothing to do with it, which honestly I think is a fantastic idea. And in this one, you find out Sarah Fier is showing these visions to people to try to warn them that she wasn't the problem and that somebody else was, The visions don't help. The visions really, really don't help. Because as soon as you see a vision of Seraphir, then the devil sends all these demons out to get you in the form of killers from the previous massacres. There are some flaws in some of this, of course. So once Dina has lived through the murder of Seraphir, and her being the scapegoat for what was actually going on, which is that Solomon Good made a deal with the devil. And I did not see that coming either. I didn't see it coming that Solomon until Dina went into like a secret room, and I was like, "Oh no." And I said that a lot during these three movies. It might be because I'm getting older. It might be, like I said, I'm used to horror movies being kind of straightforward. But some of the plot twists, I didn't see them coming. And the idea that Solomon was evil, I was pulling for young version of Nick and Ziggy to be together. And when you figure out that it's Ziggy, who's been locked in her house for the last 16 years because she's terrified of leaving because she thinks that ghosts are going to come get her. And Nick's the sheriff, you're like, man, I really hope they end up together. And she even calls him and tells him, hey, we need your help. And he shows up all right. So when we're back in 1994, what I love with it is that it goes straight to Fear Street 1994 Part 2. Bam. And Dina's back now knowing that Nick Good, who's the sheriff, is the actual bad guy. That Seraphir is not this witch that cursed. She wasn't a witch at all. Didn't curse the town. It's Nick. It's Nick that has made this deal with the devil. That as long as he gives sacrifices to the devil, so he gives one person over to the devil and lets the devil possess him and do whatever the devil's going to do, he gets power. Nothing bad ever happens to him. Gets whatever he wants. And it's passed on through each generation of the family until you get down to Nick. There's a throwaway line, I thought, in 1978. There's two of them. That when I watched this movie, the third part, I said, okay, now that makes sense. So 1978, Tommy is making a mess of everything. He's just hacking everybody with the axe. Nick finds body parts, and he's got like blood on his hands. He wipes on himself. His brother, who would end up being mayor of Sunnyvale, runs up, sees his brother with blood on his hands, and he goes, did you do this? Now, the first time through I watched this, I thought, why would his brother think that he murdered everybody? That's an odd thing for your brother to turn to you and go, so all these murders, is this you? No. After watching the third movie, I went, oh, so the brother's asking, did you do this? Meaning, we've got all these murders going on. Did you unleash a demon on the camp? Did you unleash the devil on the camp? Which is what happened. So I look back at that, and then of course there's the line that they focus on as well in the second part of 1994, which is that he told Ziggy, I can't lose you. Something along the lines of, I've let so many people die tonight, I'm not going to let you die. When she gets stabbed and dies at the end of 1978, and he resuscitates her, I thought that was weird. I thought, how did he resuscitate her? Because she got stabbed multiple times, but there's got to be something in that deal with the devil. Something there that he saved Ziggy the second time. Or he saved Ziggy, and of course the second time, not so much. Because when we're back to part 2, now Ziggy, now played by Gillian Jacobs, who is fantastic in this. Again, she can't be bad in a movie or a TV show. She can't. She just can't. Which is weird, because she played Britta on Community, and if you say somebody Britted something, that means they screwed it up. And yet the actress who played Britta never screws things up. She's absolutely fantastic. So this movie, it really shows like Ziggy going through these emotions, realizing Nick's actually the bad guy, and remembering back to him saying, I'm not going to let you die, and him resuscitating her with CPR. And so that's really, really fantastic writing. And I thought it was really well done all the way through, to when at the end of this, they overcome Nick and Dina, despite the fact that Sam's possessed and chasing her, she manages to knock Sam out. Sam is not a very effective killer. She doesn't actually kill anybody, and every time she gets loose and she's all like crazy and foaming at the mouth, she just gets overpowered. So she was a poor choice by Nick, who as his family has done through the centuries, they go to this pit where they have this deal with the devil, and they give a name. The name is then carved into the rock. That person is then possessed, and it goes. There are some plot holes in this, absolutely. When Nick decides to say Sam's name, he totally would not have, not realistically. If you're Nick in this position and you know who the stronger people are, you absolutely give the devil Dina. Because if Dina had become possessed, the odds are then that she would have killed her brother and probably would have killed Sam, and then it would have been done. He wouldn't have had to worry about losing his position, but of course, then we don't have more movies. So Sam, a poor choice. I thought it was interesting too that so when he's given one over, he can't go back and like when he went back into the pit there in the 1994 part 2, I thought if he sits down now and he gives Dina's name to the devil, can two people be possessed at the same time, or is it just one's possessed and until they're dead and you can't possess two? So again, there's some interesting angles to this. You could call them plot holes, I guess. The one plot hole that I had was, so the demon version of the killers, when all the killers are respawned, why doesn't the devil just keep doing that? Like, realistically. So they show in the movie that when they're in this demon form where they're, you can blow them up. They blow them up in 1994. It doesn't matter. They just resync up and whatever. If you can do that, why do you have to do it again later? And it was one thing. It was the only plot hole that I had with this was I'm thinking, okay, so now they're creating the demon killer versions of all these guys again. Why? If they live forever, where did they go? So they just disappear when they've killed who they have to kill? Why? Why wouldn't they just stand by? So it was one thing that I thought of that it did leave me scratching my head. But I cannot recommend it enough. I think that with horror now, I've found that either a lot of them seem to rely on the gore factor, and it takes away from the plot line. I also find that there are some that rely just on jump scares. Jump scares drive me insane. Having something thrown at the camera is not scary. Startling people doesn't mean a movie's scary. Startling people and having them like, where's the next thing going to jump out from? That doesn't make it a scary movie. Scary movies are more of a feeling of dread for the characters, a feeling something's going to happen, and maybe you feel for the characters in this movie. I felt for these characters, which is crazy at this point. Because I've watched so many horror movies over the years, you'd think I'd be desensitized to it, and there are times where I am. There are times where I watch a movie and I'm like, I don't care if any of these people die. They're all jerks. They're all terrible people. I don't... Sometimes in Friday the 13th, it's like that, where you have one likable person, and that's the one that's going to survive, because everybody else, they're just awful people. But in this set of movies, I thought they did very, very well in balancing. There's gore there to make gorehounds happy. There's a plot line there to make people who want to watch movies that have that plot happy, because there are definitely horror movies that don't really have a plot. There's some semblance of a plot in there somewhere, but I thought these did really well, and I wanted to highlight some of the younger actors in this, because these are the names I'm going to be looking for going forward. So Kiana Madeira, who plays Dina, absolutely fantastic performance, all three movies. I agree with the one review I read that said this is a star vehicle for her. Absolutely. If she doesn't end up being in Marvel as a hero at some point, I would honestly be very surprised. Everything is there that you want. She's believable as somebody who can kick ass. She is believable as vulnerable as well as strong. She played the character very, very well. And I thought the character was consistent all the way through. And then when she was Sarah for the 1666 part of the movie, I honestly believed, okay, so she's seeing this through Sarah Fier's eyes, but they're showing us this movie with Kiana Madeira as Sarah Fier, so we understand what's going on. Because if they just showed Kiana at the start and then it was the other actors being Sarah Fier the rest of the time, it would have felt completely different. And they had almost all the actors from the first two movies playing characters in 1666 as like ancestors of themselves. Benjamin Flores Jr. played Josh. I thought he was funny, and I think there's a good future there for him. And I also thought that he did pretty well in playing a. At times, the nerdiness was there, but he played a good sympathetic character. I liked him. I thought he was very good. Ashley Zuckerman plays Solomon and Nick Good. And I thought he did a good job in that Solomon and Nick felt like two completely different people. Sometimes when you have an actor and they play two different characters in a movie, or in this case in a trilogy, it still feels like the same person, right? We all know that actor that when you see him in a movie, you go, well, I know what that character is going to be like, right? And in this case, I thought Mr. Zuckerman did a very good job of being two different characters. Now, Nick, at the end, when he's realizing this is all falling apart, does sound a lot like Solomon when Solomon realizes things are falling apart, but that works. It works that Solomon's having this fight with Sarah, and then Nick's having the fight with Dina, who saw the fight between Solomon and Sarah. And when she's going down into the depths underneath Shadyside, she's having flashbacks to those moments between Sarah and Solomon. So I thought it was very well done. Julia Raywald as Kate, already talked about her. Thought she did good. She was fine as Lizzie in the third movie as well, although Lizzie was barely in it. Sadie Sink as Ziggy. This might have been the breakthrough performance of the entire trilogy. She's barely in the third movie. I thought her turn as Ziggy in the second movie in 1978 is absolutely fantastic. And again, it's about portraying strength. You have your weakness as well, and some unpredictability in it that I didn't know who was going to end up living in this movie, in the 1978 movie. I thought tells you just how solid it was. Emily Rudd playing Cindy, no relation to Paul Rudd. I looked that up right away. I'm like, Emily Rudd, gotta be related. Nope, not related. As Cindy, I thought Cindy was really funny. She reminds me of Emma Roberts. There are a couple other actresses there too that I can't put a finger on it, but she reminds me of. There are a couple of other ones, and it'll probably come to me at a later date. But Emily Rudd was just fantastic in this, just great in 1978, and then she had a bit part in 1666 as well. But 1666 is the story of Sarah Fear and the creation of a villain that's not really a villain. So I really liked Cindy. I was stunned when she got murdered, and it was by Tommy. And it was just upsetting because her and Tommy had been a couple, and she had spent the whole movie showing she was willing to fight back, and she ended up actually killing him initially, and then she even took his head off the second time just to try to protect her sister. But eventually, the demons got to them. And yeah, when he chopped her in the chest, I went, okay, she's alive? Because we still think to this point, at least most I did, I thought it was Cindy telling the story. So I was like, wait, how did Cindy live through that? And then I started thinking, wait, so Seaburn, is she actually dead? Is this going to be like she's trapped these kids and now we're in a Hansel and Gretel situation? Like, what's going to happen here? Is she going to throw them in the oven? Like, I didn't know. But then you find out that Ziggy, her first name is Christine. And she has these really nice moments with Ted Sutherland, who plays the young Nick Good. And I thought he did very, very well. And I cannot wait to go back and watch it again, knowing now that it is Nick who lets loose Tommy on everybody else. And yeah, it is it's something. Really, really something to watch this movie and see these characters develop. And to see a relatively unknown director, according to Rotten Tomatoes, she only had one movie before this. To see a director come in and really put this together, and this ensemble cast is fantastic. So they do a part 4. I really hope they find a way to get as many of these actors. And there's others. There's others that aren't on the board. I could have filled it with basically everybody that was in all 3 movies. But I wanted to highlight these characters and these actors. But I can't wait to see young Nick and try to figure out, so when did he give them Tommy's name? And then the other, if it's a plot hole, we'll see. I'll have to go back and look. That they hear a whisper, which is, I guess, the devil whispering to them, meaning they're about to become possessed. Although that's kind of iffy too, because sometimes Dina heard the whisper a bunch of times, never got possessed. But, or was that Sarah Fear whispering, right? So for me, I'll be interested to see the timeline of how long after somebody should be possessed that they get possessed. It felt like the murderer at the start of 94, here's his name said, and then everybody's murdered. 1978, it feels like Tommy hears it, and then he's not turned until, what, 8 or 9 hours later, maybe. So yeah, but cannot recommend this trilogy enough. Can't. There's just good horror movies. I really appreciate them, and I feel like all three of these did a very good job. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.